All right. I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we are live. And with that, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to each and every one of you. It is, of course, Tuesday. It is 12 o'clock. And as such, we are live with the Stefan Report, talking about everything that's happening in the country. It is incredibly cold here in Cape Town. So I have literally a shirt, a jersey, and a jacket on, and I'm still cold. So it's not great. It's not great at the moment, but I am super happy to be here with all of you. James, how you doing? Antoinette, how you doing? Echo, how you doing? Akoro, how you doing? Adon, how you doing? And call me Amy. How are you? Very, very happy that all of you are here. And then, of course, to everyone that isn't chatting because maybe you're busy working or driving or whatever it is, I am super happy to be joined by all of you. I wanted to say something. Oh, the astute among you may have noticed that I changed the time. We were originally going to be live at 1:30, and that is because I was supposed to be on the Truth Reports live stream right now at 12 o'clock, but Joe just emailed me and said, we can't do it this week. Can we postpone until next week? So I will be live next week with the Truth Report. So now I can be with you guys on time. It sucks a little because the Truth Report streams on Tuesdays, which is also when I stream. So on Tuesdays, if you notice that I'm going live at like a half an hour or an hour and a half later, just know that it's because I'm on the Truth Report and I still want to do the live streams with all of you as we go. Warren, how you doing, sir? Good, but sick, but glad to see you all better. I am finally better. So, I do not envy you for being sick. It's not a fun one. I've spoken to so many people that say this flu that is currently going around is one of the weirdest they've ever seen in their entire lives. Like, some people get super ill, like myself. I was literally, as the Afrikaners say, lippe teen die klippe for like 2 weeks, just absolutely out of it. My brother got exactly the same, and he had a bit of a cough, and he felt a little bit awkward for like 2 days, and then he was fine. So I have no idea what the hell this is, but everyone's sort of reporting all manner of different things. It's insane. You know what I'm sick of? People still praising the DA. So call me Amy. We are going to be talking about that, right? We are. Henry, how you doing, sir? We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about effectively Ramaphosa and Ramaphosa's address to the nation on Sunday. We could probably start with that one. I had the incredible misfortune of having to listen to Ramaphosa again. You know what? At this point, I want Ramaphosa gone, not even because he is arguably the worst president in the history of South Africa ever, period, ever. But I'm just sick of listening to him. Every single time he speaks, on Sunday as well, he acts as if the things that are happening in South Africa is happening to all of us. He speaks as if the ANC has not been in charge of the country for 32 years. The things that's happening is sort of completely outside of his control. He has no idea how it happened, but now that we're here, the government may as well solve it. I knew that I could stop listening to him the second he said government will continue to. When a politician is addressing a serious issue, and they say government will continue to, what they're saying in political speech is, we are already doing everything that we were going to do. We're not going to do anything extra. What we are doing at the moment is exactly the extent to what we're willing to do. We will just continue doing it, right? So it's a way for them to sort of say we're on it without them being on it. And that was effectively Ramaphosa's speech. A lot of it was effectively what the ANC loves to do, which is the ANC calls dreams plans. They have all of these dreams of things that they want to achieve, but they don't have a plan of how to actually achieve it. And so they call the dream a plan. We would love a country that has no illegal immigrants. That's the plan. We're going to have a country with no illegal immigrants, right? How are we going to achieve this? We're just going to have no immigrants. That's the plan. That's sort of the idea. If you guys remember, the ANC a while ago had this 10-point plan for the economy and how the economy was going to grow. And effectively, the 10-point plan was boiled down to we're going to have economic growth because we need economic growth. And it's like, okay, how are you going to achieve? No, trust us. We're going to have the economy grow. He did the same thing. In the speech, he goes on about how the big problem here in South Africa isn't immigrants. Immigrants is not the problem. It's the lack of economic growth. And so government is going to have more economic growth. Pray tell how? Exactly? No, you don't get it. We've decided now that it's time for economic growth. And so the economic growth will just automatically follow. The problem, of course, with that is that the reason the economy isn't growing is because of the ANC. It is their policies that have destroyed the economic growth of this country. It is the ANC's policies that have allowed our borders to basically become guidelines. You know, they're not even really borders anymore. Our borders are more just these truly invisible lines that the government goes, cross it if you can. And then, the immigrants go, cool, let's do this. The DA isn't much better. If you look at how the DA is sort of stomping their chests and pounding their chests, going, Minister Schreiber is constantly harping on about how many hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants they're pushing out of the country. The problem, of course, with that is, much like you guys remember, we covered the DA attacking Pieter Groenewald, Minister Groenewald of Correctional Services. And they attacked him because he had not yet done anything to solve the problem of 28,000 missing parolees since 1992. The issue, of course, with that is that if you actually look at what Minister Groenewald is doing, you can see that he is working towards finding the 28,000, but he has identified the underlying problem with why the 28,000 is missing, and that is budgetary. There's just not enough money to implement the reforms required to make sure that parolees don't go missing. And so how do you fix that problem? Well, you have to figure out how to save money because the state is broke. The state can't give you more money. And so you need to save the money that you are getting so that you can free up cash so that you can implement the reforms. That's how a plan usually works. And anyone that's ever come up with a plan, it would be like me saying, guys, I've decided I'm going to be skinny now. And then you go, well, how are you going to do it? And then I grab the Big Mac and I take a big bite and I say, well, I'm just going to lose weight. But, do you have a plan? No. And then I take some cheese snacks and I shove it in my face and I go, but guys, I'm really going to get skinny now. At some point, all of you are going to go, dude, you don't seem to have a plan on this. The way you're gaining all of this weight is by putting way too much calories in and not taking enough calories out. And you seem to not understand this because you're continuing to put calories into yourself and we don't see any evidence of you having a plan of taking out those calories, right? Like fundamentally, that is the DA. The fact that the DA criticized Minister Groenewald shows me that the DA doesn't understand how a problem needs to be solved. Leon Schreiber just deporting a bunch of immigrants, it doesn't help, right? If your boat is taking on water, like there's giant holes in the boat, and you take a little bucket and you just start scooping out water, that's not going to save the boat. You have to figure out how to plug the holes. Because the holes is the problem. The water filling up is a consequence of the problem. But that's not the problem. The holes is the problem. The DA seems to have this approach to everything. Take, for example, Jordan Neal Lewis and his budget in the Western Cape. Jordan Neal Lewis, and it'll become abundantly clear over the course of this stream, but Jordan Neal Lewis is completely left-wing, right? He is a leftist. The big problem with saying that and why a lot of people will push back is they'll go, well, Jordan Neal Lewis criticizes the ANC for their left-wing policy, so clearly he is not left-wing. The answer is immediately stop thinking in absolute terms about things. When you say leftist, right? What people immediately see is, oh, so they're Stalinist, Soviet Union types. That's like, you can have parties that are super left on some things and a little bit more center on others, and another party that is super left wing on those other things, and yet a little bit more center on some things. It doesn't mean that that party is now not left wing. It just means that that party has different priorities than the one. So, for example, the ANC is fiercely anti free markets, fiercely anti free markets. The problem for the ANC, and the only reason they've not been able to act against the free markets in South Africa, is because of the constitution. It doesn't mean that the ANC likes the free market. It just means that they can't get rid of the free market until such time that they can change the constitution. The problem for the ANC is that changing the constitution will destroy the economy because they have eyes. They've been able to see what Zimbabwe has done. They've been able to see what happened in other communist countries that immediately just clamped down and communize their entire society. And so the ANC is trying to figure out, how do we get to this communist utopia without destroying the economy in the process? Because we don't know how to fix the economy should that happen. And so from the DA's perspective, they aren't as anti-free market. Let's make this clear. The DA likes the free market, but the DA has more of like a Chinese model towards the free market. And that is super obvious when you actually look at the first story that we're going to cover today. And I am seeing your comments, guys, and I will get to your opinions on this. I just want to frame the conversation so that we know what we're talking about, so that I can get your input on what exactly is happening here. But very interestingly, when you look at what happened yesterday, so this story breaks yesterday. We find out about this, and I don't want to show you guys the actual email, even though I now have the actual email, but I'm not sure if I may dox people that don't want to be doxed. And so all I can say is I have received the actual authentic email, the email response. I know now everything that was written in that response, and so I can confirm to you that everything that we're about to discuss is real. This genuinely has happened exactly the way that it played out, right? Exactly the way that it's been reported up until now. And I will have a video about this also after the stream. But for now, let's just quickly discuss. So there is an organization called FMD Response SA. They've been formed specifically because of the FMD outbreak that has happened. And they are filled with veterans, people who are incredibly knowledgeable on foot-and-mouth disease. So you have vets, you have biological experts, you have farming experts, and they've all joined this FMD network in as a way to help government. The idea was never that they're going to solve the issue. And when you go through this original email that was sent, so they wrote up this letter, and then they attached this letter to the email that they sent to the Department of Agriculture. So that's sort of the fullness of the story. This letter, all they're doing here is they're asking the government to accept their help. They're not saying that they want to replace government. They're not saying that government is, in fact, they start off by praising Minister Steenhuisen, sort of kissing his ass a little bit to get in his good graces. But then they also do say that they're asking the government to change their policy ever so slightly to actually take into account the biology of the disease. So how does this disease actually work? Because right now, the way that government is vaccinating is completely wrong. So the way that you want to do vaccinations, and I'm no expert here. This is from doing the research and listening to farmers who know how this thing works, to vets who know how this thing works. The way that you deal with foot and mouth is, say you have a case on a farm, right? So your farm has a case of foot and mouth. You don't start by vaccinating your cow. That's wrong. You start 10 kilometers out. So you take it on the map. Here's your farm. This is where your cow is. And this is where your cow contracted foot and mouth disease. And then you, on the map, draw a circle 10 kilometers around your farm, and you start vaccinating from there inwards, with your cows being the last to be vaccinated. And the reason for it is you're trying to build a biological barrier around these cows to first protect the cows that are around your cow so that it doesn't spread. Because once it spreads to other cows, those cows will reinfect your cows after they've been vaccinated. Because the vaccination is also not a permanent thing, right? New cows are born, those cows need to be vaccinated. And the problem is, if you're not building this sort of barrier around it, you'll just have cross-contamination consistently. Plus, you will start risking mutations to this disease. They are rare, but they can happen. And if you have a mutation to foot and mouth that mutates outside of the vaccine, everything starts from scratch. Because now the current vaccine no longer does anything, and now you need a brand new vaccine that can actually stop this new strain, or even if it is a known strain, the problem is you're going to have to get new vaccines because the current vaccine is completely null and void. So you want to be very careful with how you vaccinate. And right now, the government isn't doing that. They're just going to farms and just vaccinating the farms because these farms have foot and mouth. And so this response unit is saying, keep in mind how the biology of this disease works, keep in mind how you do it, and then we can vaccinate. And furthermore, they're literally just asking that the government, in all of the millions of doses that they've achieved or that they've received, that they make these available to the private industry so that the private industry can help government to get this disease under control, which is fair because that was literally the Constitutional Court's ruling. The Constitutional Court said that John Steenhuisen's policy of government will solve all of your problems and you need to wait was unconstitutional. And as a result of that, government had to allow the private sector to be included. This is all that the foot and mouth guys were asking for. They weren't asking John Steenhuisen to run a marathon. If they were, I could understand John Steenhuisen's reluctance. The man has gotten very fat while in office. A marathon may kill him. It's not what they're asking. In fact, they're not even asking him to do 5-star jumps or a few burpees. He can continue eating his McDonald's. He can continue chilling in his office. He can go to all of the banquets with his best friend, Cyril Ramaphosa. None of that is under threat. They're just asking him to take advice from people that know what they're doing. And I guess we should also just be very clear. John Steenhuisen's entire life has been politics. John Steenhuisen has never achieved anything outside of politics. He's not some well-known lawyer that built a law practice or some businessman that created a successful business. John Steenhuisen is effectively a professional liar because he's a politician. They all lie, including the words and the. Every word out of a politician's mouth is a lie. So John Steenhuisen has been a professional liar his entire career. And as a result of that, John Steenhuisen obviously doesn't have the necessary skills to deal with this disease. And all these guys are asking for is, let us help. We have the necessary skills to deal with this disease. So how does John Steenhuisen and his illustrious chief of staff deal with this issue? Well, I'm glad you guys asked. So Yana LaRue decides to forward the email from Foot and Mouth Response with a bit of a amusing joke. Attached, just received for some amusement. In other words, the DA responds to the problem by laughing at the experts asking the minister to stop destroying farmers' livelihoods. She sends this around to all of her friends in government, saying, guys, just so that you guys can laugh a little bit at these free market people thinking that we care about anything that these experts thinking that we need help in destroying farmers' livelihoods. We can do it. We've been destroying the small farmers of this country. Why do they think we need help? We know what we're doing, right? That's their response. Now you might say, but Stephen, okay, let's go. Show us now how John Steenhuisen has reacted. He's fired. Yana LaRue has been fired. or maybe, Steeneisen has been recalled. No, no, no. No, no, no. I am happy to report, ladies and gentlemen, to all those of you that love Steeneisen, absolutely nothing has happened to John Steeneisen. In fact, John Steeneisen went. This was last night, I believe. No, this was on June the 9th. So yeah, it was this morning actually. This morning, John Steeneisen came out with his own response, not addressing the issue. Right. The entire internet is ablaze with this response from his chief of staff. John Steeneisen has not yet addressed it. No one in government has addressed it. The Department of Agriculture has not addressed it. Jana LaRue has not addressed it. But John Steeneisen comes out and he says, thank you. Now, I want you to focus on who he's thanking. The SA Feedlot Association, RMIS, MPO, RPO, Agri-SA, AFASA, Stud Breeders Association, TLU-SA, SAPO, MTT, and ICC and Grain SA, and to all the other industry players not related to foot-and-mouth disease for your engagement, support, and advice this past year and a half. Together, we will defeat foot-and-mouth disease. See, the people that John Steeneisen are thanking here are people who do not represent small to medium farmers. Every single one of these organizations support industrialized farming. In other words, big farmers like Karen Beef. I made a video on this on Friday. Not many people watched it because I don't think most people care about this story anymore, which is sad, but at the same time, it's understandable. Karen Beef put out a huge thank you to Minister Steeneisen for the incredible work that he's done in foot and mouth because they're finally able to export their beef again. Karen Beef is the largest meat producer in South Africa. It's not even close. They are massive. Karen Beef has also had an interesting history with the government. There was at one point some moves made to make Karen Beef smaller and to allow Karen Beef to hire people of color to be part of the management. Somehow all of that disappeared. To this day, Karen Beef is still owned by the family, right? It's a family-owned business, but it is incredibly large. And so the ANC, for all of this, their hatred of, companies that don't adhere to BEE and all the rest of it, Karen Beef somehow gets a pass. They don't have to be BEE compliant. They don't have to be employment equity compliant. They can continue doing what they're doing. And it also is telling that they are the first people that's able to export their beef. Not the small farmers that are dying, that are killing themselves, that are losing their farms. And it's going to be interesting to see as this thing plays out. I have a feeling Karen Beef is about to add a lot more farms to their portfolio. I have a feeling that within the next year, we're going to learn that Karen Beef has added thousands more hectares of farmland to their portfolio of farmers that was forced to sell because they could no longer operate. So John Steeneisen, at least based on what I'm seeing, looks to be in the pocket of big business. And from what I'm seeing, it looks like he's destroying small farmers on purpose. And when small farmers reach out to him and say, hey, Mr. Steeneisen, would you mind helping? Would you need some help? Because we can help. His chief of staff goes, lol, no, we don't care about you. Of course, here you have Gideon Jacobs. Gideon Jacobs is a journalist, and Gideon Jacobs actually asked Minister Steeneisen, you can read it for yourself, but I will, for brevity's sake, also read this for you. So that you don't give answers in public, maybe you will give it privately, and maybe you can read with comprehension. So where is the misinformation that you so blatantly lie about? It is your own department. Why has your department not paid Biogenesis yet, nor Dolvet? And why did OBP hijack the import of Dunevax? I asked you numerous times when you became minister that we discuss foot and mouth disease, stock theft, and more, but your open door policy was all lies. Ivan Mayer and Noku would have done 1,000 times better in your position, as you have become a total failure. John Steenhuisen decides he won't respond to any of this. Right? He won't answer any of his questions. Instead, John Steenhuisen just goes, "You're sick. Get help," with 2 commas, not just one, which to me suggests that we're also dealing with not only do we deal with a completely incompetent minister, but he's also ignorant of grammar and the basic use of the English language, because 2 commas is, as far as I know, not the way to speak. But anyways, this is John Steenhuisen not responding to the actual questions of a journalist. Now, sure, you can make the argument this journalist was a little bit inflammatory, but if you understand the full context here, you will know that this journalist has asked John Steenhuisen direct questions for months, and John Steenhuisen has at every single turn framed his questions as misinformation. A question can't be misinformation. If I'm just asking you a question, someone told me on my video on Friday about this disease, they say to me, "I hope you have the evidence, because they will be coming after you for this misinformation." And if you watched my video, I make no accusations. I only ask questions. It looks fishy. I don't need evidence for asking questions. But if I'm seeing smoke and I'm feeling the heat on my face, it is reasonable for me to ask, "Guys, is there a fire? I'm seeing smoke. I feel some heat coming off me. I think I'm hearing things crackle. There might be a fire there. Can someone go check? Is there a fire?" To then scream misinformation, "There is no fire." I'm not spreading anything. I'm asking a question. I'm seeing big industrialized farmers exporting for the first time ever, and I'm seeing small farmers being destroyed by a government that has done everything in its power to not allow the small farmer to actually solve their own problem. What am I supposed to believe here? The small farmers are busy drowning. The small farmers are asking, "Can we inflate these boats that we have with us? There are some boats in the pool. We'd like to inflate them so that we can get on them." And government is actively taking away the boats. So I'm asking, is government trying to kill the small farmers? Because that's what it seems like. That's what it's feeling like. Now, to be totally fair to the DA, not all of the people at the DA were actually on board with this. And you actually had Ian Cameron, who came out after this was broken by WSM. And Ian Cameron, who is part of the DA, came out and said, "This is inexcusable and does not represent all of us. I am truly sorry that you are being treated this way during the current near impossible circumstances some farmers are facing." Ian Cameron. The problem, of course, as you will see throughout the course of this live stream, is that from the DA's perspective, Ian Cameron will not remain a minister or a member of parliament for long for the DA. And what I mean by that, the DA got Ian Cameron as a political stunt. He's the guy that most of the right-wing or more conservative Afrikaners might look at and say, "Hey, we kind of like this guy." But from the DA's perspective, Ian Cameron does not represent the values of the DA. John Steenhuisen does. The fact that John Steenhuisen has made an absolute cock-up of foot-and-mouth disease and has not yet been recalled. In fact, he's not even been reprimanded by Jordan Neal Lewis for any of the things that he's done, tells me that John Steenhuisen is doing exactly what the DA wants him to do. Now, how does that work? Well, in order to understand this, remember what we spoke about. The DA is as leftist as the ANC, but they're different. The ANC hates the private sector. They would love to kill all of the private sector. The DA likes the private sector, but very much in the Chinese model. So how does the Chinese model work? Okay, so the Chinese model is as follows. The free market can do whatever the free market wants to do. If you're a business in China, you can go nuts. You can do as much business as you want. But political power, all political power, belongs to the state. The government does not share power. If a business starts to act as if it has some political power, that business gets closed down quick. Government determines the policy, the direction. The free market can then do whatever they want, provided that they're working towards the plan that the government has. This is the DA. This is how the DA thinks. Those of you who are so inclined and understand the reality of the world will immediately notice that this is the World Economic Forum's stakeholder capitalism. That's how it works. Stakeholder capitalism is the idea that big businesses can do whatever they want, provided they do not interfere with government. Government owns the realms of politics and the realms of power. Small business and business, they can do business, provided they don't step on the toes of government. Jack Ma found out just how dangerous it is to step on political power when he got recalled and completely disappeared and was subsequently re-educated in China as to exactly what the CCP will and will not allow. And this is John Steenhuisen. The fact that you have Yana LaRue openly mock foot-and-mouth response essay, an organization that is only trying to help in order to safeguard small farmers in South Africa, the fact that the DA mocks these farmers shows you that their interest isn't with these farmers. To the DA, 1,000 fewer small farmers just means a larger Karen beef. The country is still getting beef. But from government's perspective, it's far easier to control 2 or 3 conglomerates than what it is to control thousands of small people. Like, you need to understand why stakeholder capitalism is the way that it is, because it is fundamentally about control. Now, stakeholder capitalism, I'll quickly say this and then I'll come to you guys so that I can get your thoughts on this. But just to sort of break into it so that you guys understand, stakeholder capitalism, the reason the communists decided to reach this ideal of stakeholder capitalism is because, looking at the Soviet Union, they realized that central planning doesn't work. And the reason for it is the economy is too complex. One of the things that consistently killed millions of people in the Soviet Union was that the central committee that had to come up with all of the plans for the economy would consistently get it wrong. They would plan for a certain amount of food, and then something would happen, and suddenly the amount of food that they were planning for wasn't enough, and now millions are dying of famine. Then they would plan for a certain amount of steel, and then it turns out something happens, and then there isn't enough. So they realized centrally planning an economy is impossible. An economy has just too many moving parts. The best example of this would be, one season, you think that a red dress is going to be all the rage because it was all the rage this season, right? So you're going to start making millions of red dresses for next season. But next season, people want yellow dresses. They no longer want red dresses. But if you're a central committee, by the time you learn that people actually want yellow dresses and not red dresses, you've already made millions of red dresses. So there's no way to make those dresses yellow, and therefore people just need to accept that it's going to be red, not yellow, because that's what it is, right? By the time you're able to change it, it's already the season after. So central committees are just too slow at responding. And so this idea was born, stakeholder capitalism. Instead of the central committee of the government trying to predict where the market is going to be at any given point in time, why don't we just allow the market to run the economy and we just run the market? But now's the problem. If I have millions of small businesses, how the hell do I run the market? That's too hard. But if I just have a few, so if I have Amazon for all retail, and I have Google for all online video and news, and I have X for all social media, and I have Karen Beef for all beef production. Now it's pretty easy, right? Because all I have to do is I have to tell Karen Beef, stop doing this, and then Karen Beef just stops doing it. I can tell Karen Beef, increase the price of beef to double because I want people to eat less beef, and then Karen Beef can do it. I don't have to work with thousands of small farmers, and these farmers can then choose to undercut everyone else or implement some crazy taxes. People don't even know this, but taxation in China is actually super low. The CCP doesn't tax their people a lot because they don't have to. If the CCP doesn't like a specific product being consumed in China, they just tell the company that makes the product to stop making the product. It's as simple as that, right? Or if they want the product more expensive, they just tell the company. They don't have to work through weird taxation to get people to stop. This is what you have in Europe quite often, where they have to increase insane taxes just to get people to stop eating beef. And as a result of this, they're killing all of the farmers, including the big ones, because people can no longer afford to buy the beef. So it's just, that's the difference between the DA and the ANC. Both super left wing, but different. They want different things. All right, so let's see what you guys have to say. I'd rather have a broken country, a Wild West model where we build our own community than a functioning country under globalist, i.e., DA rule. So, Roll Boss, I'm with you on that. You won't have a functioning country under the DA. I think people oftentimes mistakenly believe that the DA is competent to a fault. Because when you first come into Cape Town, there is most definitely you're surprised. I remember when I first arrived here, it felt like I wasn't in South Africa anymore. The streets are clean, the lights work, the beaches are clean, the roads are beautiful, everything just works. And then when you live here for a while, so I've been living here now for almost 5 years, you start to notice that it just looks better because the rest of South Africa is so screwed. And it's not quite as screwed as the rest of South Africa. But it can still take a while for things to get fixed. You know, you have roads that basically with every single rainfall falls apart. Just pothole after pothole after pothole. They fix the potholes, sometimes fast, sometimes not so fast. And then the next bit of rain that falls, the potholes are right back because it's not done well. You have buildings that take years to actually start up. In fact, the entire housing crisis in South Africa is 100% manufactured. There is no housing crisis in Cape Town. It's manufactured. And it's manufactured because not only does a builder in Cape Town have to adhere to all of the asinine rules that the ANC has, but the city of Cape Town has their own list of asinine rules that developers have to deal with before they can actually get building. And so as a result of that, we're not building enough homes. There's not enough homes. Homes are very expensive because there isn't enough homes. It can be fixed, but they won't fix it because the DA doesn't want to fix it. Right now, those expensive homes sort of allows the DA to filter who gets in because it allows them to increase their rates and taxes to absolutely astronomical levels and, you know, sort of build their own little rainbow nation here in South Africa. So fundamentally, it needs to be understood through that lens. Do you think Jacob Zuma played for the WF? I think he did his own thing rather than the globalist DA. No. So Jacob Zuma definitely didn't play for the World Economic Forum. Jacob Zuma, in a lot of ways, is actually, I think, one of the most honest politicians South Africa has ever had. The man was honestly selfish and only in it for himself. He could not care less. You know, this is the reason why you will see people like Cyril Ramaphosa distance themselves from Jacob Zuma. Why they will call state capture a blight in the history of South Africa, and why they will fiercely say and speak as if State capture was happening to the ANC. It wasn't the ANC that perpetuated it. And the reason for it is it wasn't the ANC that perpetuated state capture. The ANC wants to work towards their communist utopia. Jacob Zuma could not care less about any communist utopia. Jacob Zuma just wanted to make money. That's why the free market, that's why the economy was still growing at about 1.9% per year, because Jacob Zuma couldn't care less, right? He couldn't care less. Like, you guys can make money, I will make money, my friends will make money, everyone will just make money. The problem, of course, is that his friends started stealing so much that it was just not going to continue happening. Right? At some point, Eskom started to completely break down. At some point, it all just started to fall apart. But fundamentally, Jacob Zuma at least didn't pretend to care. Jacob Zuma didn't care. He just wanted to be rich. And you can see it with the MK as well. Jacob Zuma doesn't care. He just wants to be rich. From his perspective, the suffering of black people doesn't care. White people doesn't bother Jacob Zuma. I would actually argue Jacob Zuma is also probably the least racist politician that we've ever had in South Africa, insofar as Jacob Zuma genuinely couldn't care less. Whether white people pay, whether white people don't pay, this was his time to shine. Cyril Ramaphosa is a bit more ideologically captured. So Cyril Ramaphosa definitely believes in the socialist utopia. Runze say we will be in big crap. Christy, you're not wrong. Goeiedag. Government only care about keeping the perception of power. Turksvay, how you doing, sir? And yes, you are correct. I don't think Jacob played the games. That's why they needed to get Cyril, that had been trained for this, in place. I actually agree with that. One thing I don't get, why are they so proud to be the leader of a broken system land? I'm ashamed to say they are my leaders. So, James, in order to answer this, you have to understand a little bit deeper the way communism works. So you'll oftentimes get people that say, "Oh, communists have good intentions, but their plans are flawed." This is a severe misunderstanding of the communist mindset. Communists don't have good intentions. No communist anywhere cares at all about the suffering of the poor. The poor is merely an avenue to achieve their greatest ambition, which is vindication and vengeance. Communism is 100% an ideology driven by greed. Nothing else. It is not an ideology that is driven by empathy. It is empathy. It is greed dressed up as empathy. When communists say they want to help the poor, what they really mean is they want to punish the rich. And so Cyril Ramaphosa can't be ashamed of what is happening in South Africa, because he is punishing the people that he wants to punish, which is the Afrikaners. That's the main goal. The Afrikaner must suffer, because from Cyril Ramaphosa's perspective, the Afrikaner deserves it. Cyril Ramaphosa, and to be fair to Cyril Ramaphosa, it's not the fact that Afrikaners are white, which is another thing that a lot of people make a mistake to believe. In fact, I would go so far as to say this was perhaps America's biggest misstep. They classified it as Afrikaner discrimination. It's not Afrikaner discrimination. The ANC are not discriminating against Afrikaners. The ANC is not discriminating against white people. It is political discrimination. The ANC hates conservatives. They hate freedom. They despise people who believe it. Now, it manifests as racial, because a lot of Afrikaners like conservatism. A lot of Afrikaners believe in freedom. Afrikaners don't like this socialist altogether mindset. And so it is racial because they are attacking white people, but their problem isn't white people. That's why Carl Niehaus can, do whatever Carl Niehaus does, and they love him. Peter Kriel, they love Peter Kriel. Kim Heller, they love Kim Heller because they're part of the revolution. They understand that they must, support black supremacy because they're part of that revolution. And from their perspective, an Afrikaner that supports black supremacy, beautiful. Best thing they could ever see because it makes them feel even more supreme. Here you have this white person that is submitting to us, bending the knee to us, kissing my buttocks. They love that. They don't hate white people. They hate conservative Christians. And that goes for Afrikaners, that goes for Sepedi, Zulu. Doesn't matter what race you are. If you're a conservative and you believe in freedom, Christian values, they hate you. That's the goal. That's the people that needs to pay. So yes, it looks like Afrikaner persecution because it is, but that's not the goal. Turks Fay with the 10 community subs. Sir, thank you. You are far too kind. You're far too kind, sir. Ek het nie die krag om na daai vuil goed te luister nie. In Engels, very evil lying man, sickening, agree, the worst so-called president ever. So let's just talk about Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm not going to show you guys anything here. But let's talk about our good friend and our dishonorable president, Cyril Ramaphosa. He goes in front of the nation and he speaks to the nation about immigration. And he ends up saying literally nothing. Nothing. Nothing new. In fact, it almost felt as if he was challenging the protesters. It felt as if he wanted the protesters to start acting out. He was poking them, going, come on, do something. Let's go. By the way, can I get some hearts in chat for Turks Fay? Truly appreciate that, sir. You are very, very kind. Adding more members to the Republic, always very much appreciated, sir. There's not much to say, quite frankly. There really is not much to say. He didn't say anything new. He didn't say anything of value. He's not going to solve the issue. And I'm starting to think it might be by design. He wants these protesters to start something. Because communists understand the value of a crisis. Crisis means power. See, if you have a bunch of protesters burning down the country, now you can move in and you can oppress the people because you're saving the people. Because that's what it felt like. It felt like Ramaphosa was effectively telling the protesters, do something. You'll see. Because he's not taking seriously. So he blames the lack of economic growth. But I will tell you now, it's not just the lack of economic growth. Economic growth definitely is a problem, yes. But it's not the only problem. You cannot have open borders. It doesn't work that way. A country cannot call itself a country if it can't protect its own borders. The whole point of a country is that you have borders. And if someone threatens those borders, you defend those borders. Yeah, it's exactly the same as the UK, Shanta. It's exactly the same thing. the infrastructure, and what's more frustrating to me, and this is something that I continue to harp on about, and a lot of people don't want to hear me when I say this. The this system is so evil. It South Africa, and actually, to all of my international viewers, South Africa should serve as a warning to people throughout the world. These European countries that are importing millions upon millions of foreign nationals into their countries, people who do not share their values. And guys, I'm not going to show you guys this video, but I don't want anyone to ever try to pretend like all cultures are equal. All cultures are not equal. Last night, a man in Belfast. Now, I won't show you the video because I'm pretty sure YouTube will absolutely block this video if I showed you the video. But there is an immigrant, an African immigrant, sitting on the chest of a white Irish man. The man is completely bloodied up, and this immigrant is trying to behead him with a knife, trying to cut off his head. Luckily, some other white Irish guys arrive and start beating the crap out of this immigrant. South Africa is the future that you have to look forward to. A country where you will pay the taxes, where you will work to make the system work, and you will have no power whatsoever. That's the system. Conservatives have no power in this country. None. None. If all the conservatives of this nation voted together, they might get 10% of the vote. The leftists can still overrule you on everything. You're expected to pay. If you stop paying, they put you in jail. You're expected to take the blame for literally everything that goes wrong because, hell, they will never take the blame for that. And if you dare speak up, you'll be called a racist. You'll be called a terrorist. You'll have the government spend obscene amounts of money trying to figure out how do they silence you forever, trying to come up with laws that ensure that you can never actually speak again. But you're the reason this country is still going. If the conservatives, the people who are actively still working and making sure that this country works, if they were to all stop paying taxes, this country goes broke in seconds. But you also have no political power whatsoever. You have taxation without representation. That's your future. And no, do not. And I want to make this super clear. Come at me with this. Oh, but that's radical Islam. It is not radical Islam. And this is actually very, very important that you guys understand this. Our problems with Islam is coming. And it might come faster than people think because our government has an open door policy to basically every Muslim country in the world to send all of their Muslims here. The guy trying to chop off an Irish man's head is not part of radical Islam. That's just Islam. That is what Islam is. And if you come at me with the nonsense of, oh, but there's millions of peaceful Muslims, you need to understand how Muhammad operated. When Muhammad is in Mecca, he has almost no followers, none. And so Muhammad preaches, and this is sort of the first third of the Quran, is acceptance. Everyone is equal. Everyone serves the same God. We're all part of the same religion and the same faith, and there's love and peace and prosperity for all. With that message, Muhammad manages to convert about 70 people before the Meccans throw him out, because the 70 people he converted started to cause trouble. And the Meccans had one rule: you can believe whatever you want, but you can't criticize other people's beliefs. So Muhammad flees to Medina. When he arrives in Medina, now Medina is a Jewish town. It's populated only by Jews, and there's three tribes in Medina, Jewish tribes. They don't like each other. They don't get along, but they all live in Medina. Here we have Muhammad the refugee. Muhammad is weak. He asks for protection. He loves all Jews. Everyone is equal. Still very much the Meccan sort of verses. But Muhammad starts to convert more people in Medina. And soon, Muhammad becomes the political Muhammad. This is where we get to the second part of the Quran. Now we have Muhammad, the political leader. He's no longer the religious refugee leader. He's now the political leader. And Muhammad manages to convince all three of these Jewish tribes that because he's apart from everyone else, right? He's not a Jew. He will help sort of keep the peace between these Jewish tribes. And he, because he's not a Jew, they can trust him because he's sort of apathetic to the whole process, right? 5 years after Muhammad sets foot in Medina, he has killed or chased away every single Jew in Medina. There's not a single Jew left in the whole of Medina. 5 years. And then we get to the last version of Muhammad. Muhammad, the warlord. And from here, Muhammad conquers and kills everything in his path throughout the whole of Middle East, and everyone gets one choice: convert or die. That is your choice. You have to understand these three versions of Islam, because this is how Islam operates. First, they come to your country as refugees. And when they are weak, they're open, accepting, everyone is welcome. Then they gain enough power to become political. Once they become political, they do absolutely start pushing their Sharia. They start pushing their laws. They start pushing out everyone that they don't like. And when they have enough people, they become warlords. Always. So this man chopping off another man's head, that is within keeping of Islam. That is how Islam deals with the infidels. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The second the Muslim feels that he has enough numbers to be successful, he will start attacking you. Guaranteed. No questions asked. Now, is it true that there are a lot of Muslims who just won't go along with it? Absolutely. But these are also Muslims who don't really pray 5 times a day. These are Muslims who break almost every single rule within the Quran. You might describe them as cultural Muslims. They're Muslim because they were born in a Muslim house, but they don't really believe. They're just sort of yeah, fine, whatever. They don't really care. But the problem is that when the violent Islam finally does take power, even the more cultural Muslim will submit to the violent Islam. And you, who are not Muslim, will suffer under Islam. They will kill you under in a Sharia state, because that's all they do. That is the goal. That is the commandment. So Jesus, when he speaks to his disciples, he gives them a final command. The final command. This is in John. This is in John's Gospel. Quickly read this for you guys. Right, so we're in John's Gospel. No. In John's Gospel, um, 19. Now I'm not going to find it. I was literally reading it the other night. Um, Jesus gives these disciples a final command, and he says to them, "This is what I command you: that you will love one another, just as I have loved you." Um, I'm not going to find it now. Was it before he was crucified that he gave them the final command? I don't think it was before he was crucified. Have you seen the miniseries called Know Your Enemy? That's really an eye opener. James, I have not. What is it? Um, is it John 13, 34 to 35? Albert, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So here it is. This is what Jesus gives to his disciples. This is the command given to Christians, right? Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I say to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That's the final. That's the final command given to Christians. The command to Muslims. Do you guys know what the final command is to Muslims? To bring the entire world into the house of Islam. Now, important to understand, there are two houses in Islam. There is the house of war, and there is the house of Islam. Anyone who is not a Muslim is automatically in the house of war. That means they must be killed or destroyed until they can be brought into the house of Islam. That's their final command. That is literally what they're supposed to do. Christians, love one another just as I have loved you. Muslims, kill everyone until everyone is Muslim. Those are the differences, huge differences in how this religion plays out. So when you see things like this happening on the streets of Belfast, do not be surprised. This is what will happen always. And also have as little respect as possible for the mainstream media. Look at what the BBC calls this. Man taken to hospital with serious injuries after stabbing. At least LBC News had the honesty to go attempted beheading, which is literally what it was. You can see it in the video. The guy's trying to saw off his head with a knife. The BBC says some serious injuries after stabbing. He's critical. It's not just serious injuries. He's critical. He's in critical condition. They don't know if he will actually live as a result of this. But for the BBC, it's just a stabbing, you know? Like, it's a stabbing, and it's repeatedly stabbing the neck, trying to remove the head from the body. But it's still just a stabbing. It's like, oh my goodness, man. Hartzog, how you doing, sir? Stephen, I would really like to hear your thoughts on SA Muslims. Okoro, there is no difference between a Muslim in South Africa and a Muslim anywhere else in the world, right? The thing that binds them is the Quran and their warrior prophet, Muhammad. That's the thing that binds them. There is no difference. between what they want and what the rest of them want. Now, is it possible that there are a lot of Muslims in South Africa who don't know any of this? Because remember, the Quran is only to ever be read in Arabic. Most Muslims, when they convert, are not allowed to buy English versions of the Quran. Because according to the Muslims, only the Arabic is the word of God. Because God speaks Arabic, nothing else. And so most Muslims in South Africa, at least, don't know the story of Muhammad. They have no idea about the Quran. They only hear what what their imam tells them. That's it. And the imam obviously isn't going to start with kill everyone. Right? He's going to move slowly. But it's also important to understand mosques, for example. When you go to a church, what is a church? It's a house of prayer. It's a house of worship. Christianity isn't a political movement. Christianity isn't a social movement. Christianity is a faith. It's a religion. That's it. A church is a building where believers gather in order to praise God. That's it. A mosque is not that. Because you have to understand the phases of Muhammad's life. He is a refugee, he is a politician, and he is a warlord. Those are the three phases. That means that every single Muslim is a refugee, a politician, and a warlord. That means that a mosque isn't just a place of worship. It is, at any given point, dependent on the reality on the ground, a place for the weak and the frail and the poor that needs help, refugee center. It can become a political building. If they get enough power, if they get enough influence, it will become a political building. And finally, it will be a military building. Always. Because that's what Muhammad asked for. That's what he demands. And Muslims follow Muhammad. So they have to follow his life. So I am not judging all Muslims equally. Let me be clear about that. I'm not sitting here saying, Muslims across the board are evil and wicked. No. I have met really good Muslims. But I will go so far as to say a good Muslim or a person that is Muslim that is good is a very bad Muslim. Because a good Muslim is not a good person. So that would be my argument. Guests usually behave until they make it home. James, true. Cruel people like the SABC. Oh, the SABC is a joke. Like the BBC reporter who said it's a big city, you can expect a stabbing from time to time. Dude, yeah, that is nuts. That is nuts. The things that people are just forced to be okay with. But think about it in terms of South Africa. How much are we as ordinary South Africans just willing to accept? Like we must. As if there's nothing. If you guys remember what happened in the White House, what was Cyril Ramaphosa's defense against farm murders being genocide in South Africa? Well, 27,000 people die every single year in South Africa. That was his defense. That's what we have to accept. There are good, ordinary South Africans, conservative Christian South Africans who murder no one. One of the things that really gets me so angry is people who say poverty causes crime. There is literally zero evidence that supports that claim. Because every study that has ever found that poverty causes crime, guess how they do those studies? They look at all the most crime-ridden areas in the world and go, see, they're poor, therefore the poverty causes the crime. But that's the wrong way around. The evidence is clear if you just take the time, the date that you start the study back a little bit. Because you have areas that weren't poor, where the police continued to not clamp down on crime, where crime increased and eventually that area became poor. Always. Bad culture, bad people, bad policing causes crime, not poverty. I know plenty of very poor white people who have never murdered anyone, they've never raped anyone, they've never stolen anything in their lives. They're super poor. I know poor black people. I know poor black people who've never stolen anything in their lives. Ever. They don't steal because they understand that that's not what a good person should do. It is absolute nonsense to tell me poverty causes crime. Bullshit. Bad people, bad culture, bad policing is what causes crime. Poverty is merely the result of bad culture, bad people, bad governance. That's it. Yeah, I mean, Jesus had literally nothing. Most of his apostles were dirt poor, right? Like most of his apostles had no money whatsoever. They were consistently asking the churches for help because the apostles would be thrown into jail, and then these apostles won't have clothing, and it's in the middle of winter, and so they would ask the churches, "Could you send a bit of money so these guys can at least get coats, so that they're not dying of the cold." And they weren't stealing; they weren't taking what wasn't theirs. So it's complete nonsense. This idea that poverty causes crime. No, bad people, bad culture, bad governance. That's it. That's what causes all of this crap. But we, as good law-abiding South Africans, are just expected to accept it. Now, I live in a complex here in Cape Town. It's not an estate, right? It's not like the most expensive complex you could ever live in, but it's a nice complex. It's really nice. We have security guards. I love my security guards. They're really awesome people. And I love all of my neighbors. I'm not such a big fan of the head lady here. She's a bit, let's use the word busybody. She's always looking for trouble. But I love the complex. It's a wonderful place to live. Guess what? There are coloreds living here. There are Indians living here. There are black people living here. There are white people living here. Guess what else? Nothing ever gets stolen. Nothing. People leave their doors open. People leave their cars unlocked sometimes. Nothing ever gets stolen. Not a single person has ever thought to themselves, hey, I want it, because everyone here has a similar culture, similar belief system. They understand that things that don't belong to them should not belong to them. And this isn't the richest part of town, right? The people who live here aren't the richest people in the world, but they live here because they share certain values. Then you literally just go up the road from me to the trust, and you see a completely different story. Everyone there is equally poor, and they're all stealing from each other constantly, murdering each other constantly. So then you ask yourself, well, if you're poor and you're stealing because you are poor, why are you stealing from other poor people? Surely then you would be stealing from the rich people, but that's not what happens. So clearly the poverty, the lack of stuff isn't the reason you're stealing. It's because you're just a bad person. End of discussion. And that's the big issue here in South Africa. I'm gonna talk to you guys about one final story. And this might be the one that either inflames the crowd. A lot of you might get very angry. Or I'm sure some of you will agree. On Friday, the entire world, I don't know how many of you heard about this, but there's a YouTuber called, I think it's Jerry Ridgway. I think that's his name. He's a YouTuber. Um, he's one of those YouTubers that records everything, like literally everything. Um, and he recorded the news that his wife is expecting a baby. So the whole world saw that. Then he recorded the news of his wife learning that their child has Down syndrome. And then he recorded the news that they're going to kill their child who has Down syndrome because they don't want to be inconvenienced. Their words, not mine. They don't want to be inconvenienced. They're not ready to take care of a child with Down syndrome. What followed was an absolute explosion. As you can imagine, for a lot of people, this was a serious issue. You know, as you can imagine, for a lot of people, this was an immediate what do you mean? What immediately followed after that, their response to this. Now, before we get going, I think let me ask you guys, how do you guys feel about abortion? Yeah, JC and Ashley Ridgway. That's the one. It's murder. Mainly, fortunately, they didn't get the adoration they craved. I think one should only bring a life into this world if they absolutely can care for it. Okoro, the argument that I would have then is if one knows that one isn't capable of bringing life into the world, one has options of ensuring that that does not happen. For example, one could just not have sex. Getting pregnant isn't like getting a cold. It doesn't just happen. You don't walk past someone, they sneeze, and suddenly, boop, you're pregnant. You engaged in a number of activities prior to the pregnancy. But once you're pregnant, that is now life. Ending that life is murder, because that's what murder is. It's taking a life that does not belong to you. That child does not belong to you. Their life is their own. If you end that life, you are a murderer. So I'll make my position on abortion incredibly clear. Not only is it murder, it is first-degree murder. It is not manslaughter. It is not second or third-degree murder. It is first. The test for first-degree murder is that you must have full control of all of your faculties. In other words, you are not crazy. 2, you planned the murder. And 3, you then acted upon that plan with full foreknowledge of what you were doing. That is murder in the first degree. Abortion also doesn't just happen. Just as pregnancy doesn't just happen, abortion doesn't just happen. You have to plan it. You have to phone the clinic. You have to make an appointment. You have to drive to the appointment. You have to greet the doctor. You have to go lie down. And then the procedure takes place. In my opinion, if you murder someone, you forfeit your right to life. That's what the death penalty is all about. If you take a life, you forfeit the right to life. So, from my perspective, if you commit abortion, you should die. Simple as that. The death penalty for any woman that aborts her child, and for the doctors who performed the procedure, the same. So there's my position on abortion for anyone that might have wondered. And if you're thinking, well, you say you're pro-life, but that's not very pro-life. No, I'm not pro the life of murderers. You're absolutely correct. I do draw the line at people who end life because it's inconvenient to them. I do draw the line there. I'm not pro all life. Murderers don't deserve life, and that's not being inhumane. Again, no one commits murder by accident. In order to commit murder, you actively chose that action. It wasn't chosen for you. Otherwise, we would call it self-defense. Or we would call it murder in the third or the second degree. Or we would call it manslaughter. In other words, you didn't plan it. It happened in the moment. But if you planned a murder, you also plan to deal with the consequences of that action. And the consequences should be death. Now, some people will come at me and say, but it won't reduce the amount of abortions. I don't care if it reduces anything. It's about justice. And it is right and just if you end a life, that your life be ended. You decided that. No one decided it for you. That's a right and justice punishment, or a right and a just punishment for your own actions. Sure, but should they be classified as murderers too? What if the pregnancy is at risk of the mother? That's a different story, and it only accounts for about 1% of all abortions, Okoro. There's a big difference. If the child is going to kill the mother, right? We all make the moral decision to say we save the life of the mother, right? By aborting. But that's sort of like it's a legal, impossible choice to make, because you don't want to kill the child, but you also don't want to kill the mother. And so you have to weigh these two things against one another. Because more often than not, and almost always in these cases, the choice isn't the baby gets to live, the mother dies, or the mother gets to live, the baby dies. The choice is almost always in these cases, the mother will almost certainly die, and so will the child. So the pregnancy has put the mother's life in danger to the point where she will die and the child will most likely die as well. And so that's where we then make the decision, end the child's life so that, one, the mother can live, but also so that the child does not grow up without a mother. Right? So yes, it's an impossible choice. And it's a difficult one. But we do have the ability to at least make room for that. But that accounts for 1% of all abortions. 99% of all abortions the world over is actually, it's 95%. 1% is medically necessary. About 4% are as a result of rape and incest. 95% of all abortions is choice. It's aesthetic. I don't want to be pregnant, so I'll just kill the baby. And this isn't my statistics. This is the Department of Justice in America under the Biden administration. So this is also not some Republican, super conservative Department of Justice. This is the Department of Justice of the Biden administration, super left, that celebrated it. That 95% of women in America, of the over 1.3 million abortions worldwide every year, 95% of them are women who just go kill the baby. I don't care. I don't want this. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. I just don't think children should be brought into this world to suffer, to be honest. Orphanages are a horrible place, and most children don't get adopted. But then stop having sex, Okoro. Again, pregnancy isn't something that you just have to have. If you don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex. Simple as that. If you have sex with the full foreknowledge that you might bring children into the world. And if you really want to have sex, there are a lot of devices out there that will make it impossible for you to get pregnant. Pregnancy is a choice. You seem to act as if it's just sort of accident. It's not an accident. It didn't happen by accident. If you're having sex unprotected, pregnancy is going to happen. That's not an accident, that's a choice. You chose to ignore the risks, and now you want to get free of the consequences. You don't get to do that. Okoro, you can go look at the numbers yourself. Let me just put that out there. Go look at the numbers yourself. This isn't a secret. Literally, just Google it. You'll find all of it. You not believing it has nothing to do with me. That's what the statistics bear out. Yeah, I tripped. I fell. Anyways, back to the story. This guy, after announcing this, gets absolutely dragged. He then has the guile to demand that people stop attacking him because they are victims. Somehow he wants to pretend like they are the victims here. You know, they were forced to kill their child, and people should stop judging them for killing their child. But then, and this is the reason I'm telling you guys this story, because it doesn't have much to do with South Africa, but the reason I'm telling you guys this story is someone came up with a defense that I found just absolutely brilliant and perfect. Because their defense effectively means that white people have nothing to apologize for ever. So the defense of the left is that you can't issue a death certificate without a birth certificate. So by legal standards, abortion isn't technically classified as murder. Ladies and gentlemen of South Africa, I have good news. When the Dutch arrived in South Africa, there were no black people in South Africa. Zero. Because there are no birth certificates of black people in South Africa prior to the arrival of the Dutch and 1841. 1841 is when the first birth certificates in the world is implemented. Before that date, you would have church baptism papers. So if your baby was baptized, you would get a paper from the church that says your baby was baptized. And people would use this sort of as just an ID, right? Here's my papers that I was baptized. I am baptized. It wasn't an identification document, but that's the closest equivalent that people had. So good news, right? There were only white people because all the white people that arrived here had their papers that showed that they were baptized. There were no black people in South Africa because no birth certificates. Also, and this is super cool, all of the slavery in the history of the world, that never happened. No birth certificates. How can you enslave someone that was never born? That makes no sense to me. If you can't murder someone that doesn't have a birth certificate, you can't enslave someone that was never born. Right? So quite clearly, no reparations owed to anyone. And then, and this is the clincher, apartheid is not real. Did you guys know that? All of the history about apartheid is completely invented because no birth certificate. Under apartheid law, most black South Africans were never given birth certificates. They weren't given identification numbers or identification books because, well, they weren't citizens of South Africa. And so, what apartheid? We were just sort of living here and doing our own livable things. There was no one to be apart from. They weren't born. They didn't have birth certificates. Of course, we know that this is nonsense. We know that this argument is nonsense. Because I can murder you whether you have a birth certificate or not. But I highlight this because it showcases the retarded nature of the left. It showcases their inability to think. They can't think. They don't know how to think. This is the people that want to claim that they are the moral superiors of the world. This is the people that drive most of the decision making of the world. I do genealogy, can concur. Birth certificates are a recent thing. We have to research baptism records. They didn't and doesn't keep census records either. Yeah, I mean, the first birth certificates are issued between 1941 and I believe 1841 and 1910. By about 1910, most of the organized countries in the world will now issue birth certificates, but it's still not done en masse for all people in the population until really recently. It's only really for the last 50 years or so that the majority of people in a country will get a birth certificate. Because prior to that, a lot of the time in a lot of places it was optional. Like you could get a birth certificate, but you didn't have to. So there's like a like that argument is just completely null and void. Not to mention the fact that the only reason you would get a death certificate is because of legalese nonsense. It has nothing to do with the actual reason that you're dead. So it changes things quite considerably. This is a heated topic, and everyone has their own opinion, which I respect, and I'm always willing to adjust mine based on facts. Okoro, I do not. I do not encourage people to argue about this topic too heavily because you are right. It is an incredibly, it's a touchy subject, right? That being said, the test for murder isn't hard. Was that life a life, yes or no? If the answer is yes, then it's murder. End of. It's not that difficult. If the abortion is not medically necessary, and we have the same, by the way, exceptions in the real world. So, for example, if I kill someone in the defense of someone else, that's not murder. That's self-defense on behalf of someone else. Right? So there are places, even in the real world, in the big boy world, where we allow for murder, the ending of a life, but it is in defense of someone else. So we don't even call that murder. We call it self-defense. So killing someone in the defense of someone else. So if the baby is putting the mother at risk, we make a moral judgment to the best of our ability. It might be the wrong judgment. It might not be maybe there is a better way to deal with it. In fact, I know a lot of Christians who do actually leave it in the hands of God. I personally know of a couple who the wife got a diagnosis. I could probably say she's dead. She's been dead since 2006. My own mother. My mother was given a diagnosis with my two youngest brothers that they need to abort because at the time she was about 2 or 3 months pregnant, and the pregnancy was killing her. And the doctor said we should abort this. And my mother said no. Because she's a Christian, she believes that God is in control, and if it kills her, then so be it. It didn't. In fact, most Christians do exactly that. They give it to God, and they trust that God's sovereign will is in play. But as a society, we understand that most people aren't Christian. We understand that most people don't believe that God is sovereignly in control. And so we do actually say, okay, fine. If the mother's life is in danger and she is almost certainly going to die as a result of this pregnancy, then we will choose the mother's life over that of the child because it's safer. If the mother dies, the child might die as well, and then you lose both. So we make a calculated decision and we say, if we save the mother, she can have more children. But if we don't save the mother, she might die and the child might die as well. So, we lose two instead of just losing one. It's a difficult decision. There's no right answer in that scenario, but that's what we've decided as a society is good. Anything else? Anything short of that bar? No. Jason Ashley, was he recorded something that was very private? The influencer culture is cancer on its own, in its own way. He even monetized the video. It was all about dollars. So call me Amy. I'm absolutely with you. I'm absolutely with you. So for me, first I hate the word influencer. I'm not an influencer. I'm a content creator. If I influence the way you think, I want to say I feel sorry for you, but that's not really true, because I do think that my words does have influence. But if you just believe every word out of my mouth and you just go, well, Stefan said it, therefore it must be true, you're a moron. I am human. I am fallible. I make mistakes. I am not the person that you should be trusting 100% of the time, because if Stefan says that, it must be true. And I hope that none of you do that ever. I can make as many mistakes as everyone else. In fact, I probably make more mistakes than most people. And I trust you to be the ones to call me out and say, Stefan, you're wrong here. Here's the facts. And then I will admit, oops, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, guys. Right? So I'm not an influencer. My words carry influence, and they can certainly help you think in a specific way. But do not trust every word I say, because that gives me a responsibility that I'm not ready to accept. I will not be responsible for your soul or for your belief system. You're responsible for that, right? I'm just here to tell you what I think. And hopefully we agree. If we don't, we debate it and we come up with the truth. Nevertheless, I hate the word influencer. I also hate the word fans. So please, I met someone a few months ago, and they said, I'm a huge fan of yours. And I felt, I wanted to correct them and say, you're not a fan, you're just a viewer. But then that felt a little bit arrogant. Like, oh. So I didn't say anything, but please, if you ever see me in public, I love people coming to say hello, by the way. Absolutely love it. I love chatting to people. So if you see me, absolutely just come up and say, Stefan, how you doing, sir? I will chat to you gladly. But never call yourself a fan. I don't have fans. I'm not famous. I'm just a dude that likes making videos about politics. Literally, the only difference between you and me is you guys have real jobs. I just talk to a camera. But don't ever call yourself fans. I hate that word. He is an influencer. I didn't mean you. Well, most people are living proof. We are living in the movie Idiocracy. Very true. But the thing is, so one of the things that you'll not really find on any of my social media is my private life. If you go on my X, for example, I'm not consistently updating you guys with what I'm doing. On Sunday night, I went to go play board games with my pastor and my friends from church. I didn't post about that, because that's my life. No, that has nothing to do with any of you. I don't understand content creators that do this. If I get married, I'll probably tell no one about that, right? I won't show my wife to the world. I won't show my wife to the internet unless she wants me to. But even then, I don't understand why people make their entire lives content. I do not understand it. It makes no sense to me. Like, your marriage is supposed to be yours, When you get pregnant, it should be between you and your wife, and the happiness that what the hell does the rest of the world have to do with it? I do not understand it. I do not. My sister lost a baby. She's Catholic. She found out 8 weeks, no heartbeat. Waited a month for her body to actually physically miscarry. Hospital overnight. Would have been her fourth child. She's heartbroken. Shanta, I am so incredibly sorry. I won't say who this is because it's not my place to say who it is. But a good friend of mine, him and his wife wanted so they had debates before marriage, even about how many children they wanted. He wanted 4 children. She wanted 3 children. Um, and they would talk about it often. But after their third child, he sort of went to her and he said, "Are you sure? You don't want more?" And she said, "No, I'm happy with this. This is good for me." And he was sad about it, but he accepted it. Like, absolutely accepted it. And actually, he eventually was perfectly fine with it. Like, he was very happy. He had his 3 children, and they are absolutely lovely. Um, and then a few months or a few years later, his wife comes to him, and she's like, "I want another one." And he's like, "Let's go." Right? I think they had 2 miscarriages before they had their fourth. I think it was 2. It's heartbreaking. Right? It absolutely is. I'm so very sorry for your sister. And please, when you speak to her, I don't know if she knows who I am, but tell her my heart goes out to her, and I will pray for her because it is not fun. It is absolutely not fun. My mom had 6 miscarriages before my oldest sister was born. We ended up being 3 kids. We don't know why this happens, right? Life does what life does, and it plays out. And for me, it's about trusting that there is a plan and a purpose for all things. You know, uh, whether it's good or bad, everything serves a purpose. Miscarriages is more common than people think. Still sad though. I was pregnant with a baby girl. Results came back with Turner syndrome. We were going to keep the pregnancy, but God had other plans. She passed away in the womb at 4 months. She was a fighter. See, God, a lot of atheists will ask the question, why does a loving God allow things like this to happen? And the truth, of course, is that we live in a fallen, wicked world. We live in a world that is corrupt. But normally, when you speak to people after something like that happens, so when the pain has subsided, the story that I hear most often are people come out of that with their faith strengthened. Sometimes you hear of couples where that happens and their marriage is stronger than it's ever been. So that event brings them so close that they become inseparable. Um, you know, People grow as a result of it. It's this. We don't understand the sovereign will of God because it is sovereign. It is His will. We don't know what the future is, but whether it is a good thing that happens or a bad thing that happens, let me put it this way: as humans, when we think about ourselves, we think in terms of personal comfort, right? So when we read things like um, in the Bible, it says God makes all things work out for good for those who believe in Him, for those who are called according to His purpose. We read that and we think, oh, so everything's going to be good. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be great. But that's not what that passage means. If you read the entire passage in context, when God says He makes all things work out for good, He's not talking about this life. He's not talking about the temporal. He's talking about the eternal. For God, the only thing that is important is your eternal life. That's it. That's what He works for tirelessly day in, day out. When Jesus died on the cross, He wasn't dying so that you can drive a Mercedes or have $1 million in the bank. He was dying so that you can be saved and live eternally with him and his Father in Holy Communion. That's it. That's what God cares about. Everything else that God gives you is to establish his kingdom. That whether it is good or bad, it is to establish his kingdom. For some of his children, God understands, I can give wealth. Right? So some of his children will get money. And with that money, they will bless those around them. And they will increase the kingdom of God by bringing more people to God with the money that God entrusts to him. For some of his children, he does not give money. Why? Because God understands that that money will destroy that child. That child can't handle that money. And so instead, he gives that child the taste of poverty. We think of wealth as this really good thing, but wealth is a taste. And there's a famous Puritan who once wrote, I can't remember his name now, but he wrote, I know more people who failed the taste of wealth than those who failed the taste of poverty. In poverty, people understand they need God. And so they rely on him 100%. In wealth, it is very difficult to realize that you need God. Right? And the same is true in life and in sickness. We don't understand why God allows things to happen, but we do know that everything he allows to happen, he allows so that we can be brought eternally into his kingdom. So to every single one of you that is struggling, that is suffering today, I promise you, I know suffering, I know heartache, and I probably don't know what you're going through, but I promise you that it is good. And you can praise and worship God and thank him that he is good. And it might look super hard right now, and you might look at your situation and your scenario, and you might say, but Lord, I don't understand. This is too hard. It's good. He's doing it because he loves you. Not because he hates you, not because he's trying to punish you, not because he's trying to. When God punishes, it is always corrective. Always. He's not punishing you because he, feels gleefully angry at you. He does it for your own good because he wants to have you prosper. Anyways, enough of the life lessons. I just felt like that needed to be said. I don't agree that God allows things to happen. The wages of sin is death. We live in a fallen world. I know we have discussed this, but it's just a difference of opinion. Don't want to get contentious. So Job proves that God allows things to happen. The devil goes to God and he says to God, I can make Job turn his back on you. And God allows the devil to bring immense suffering upon Job. The Bible tells us that God is sovereignly in control. In other words, God controls everything. That also means that God allows things to happen. If the argument is that God doesn't allow things to happen, then that means that there are things that happen that surprises God. If God knows all things and he is in charge of all things, then all things that happen by definition has to be allowed by him. Otherwise, the argument would have to be that what? They're not, God is surprised that this happened. He didn't see it coming. I don't believe that. Job was also prior to any kind of covenant. Yeah, but the covenants didn't change God. The covenants just explained God. And Paul actually makes this argument in a number of places, but I'll just run you through it. So God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament isn't two different gods. They're exactly the same God. The problem is that the Israelites never understood who God was in the first covenant. You see, when God comes to the Israelites, so what happens in the Garden of Eden? Man tells God, I want to be God. Because that's the promise. The snake tells Adam and Eve, if you eat of this, you won't die, you will become like God. So man says, I want to be like God. And so God says, fine, if you want to be like me, here are my laws, here are my rules. If you live exactly this way, you will be gods. So God gives them the rules. And then God gives them a way out. Because this is God's nature. He is love. He gives man a way out because he knows man cannot live by the law. He gives them a way out. He gives them the sacrifices. But the sacrifices don't forgive sin. Paul makes this argument. Jesus makes this argument. It's not the sacrifice that forgives sin. It's also not following the law that forgives sin. Again, Paul makes this argument. Moses is not declared righteous by God after circumcision. Moses is declared righteous by God before circumcision. God says to Moses, because you have believed, I have counted it as righteousness to you. This is before Moses gets circumcised, before the law, because the circumcision is the sign of the law. So they get circumcised, and once they get circumcised, now they are under the law. Moses is counted righteous before it because he believed. God wants belief. He wants relationship. The law is simply if man thinks he can truly live like God, go ahead, see what you can do. If you can't do that, here is the sacrifices. But the sacrifices is not the forgiveness of sin. It's the belief that God will forgive my sins that is the forgiveness of sin, not the sacrifice. Right? The problem is the Israelites don't understand this. The Israelites, and Paul says this in Romans, the Israelites became workers of the law. So they followed the law, they sacrificed the animals, and they thought, there we go, right? No relationship with God. And so God says in Isaiah, and I will form a new covenant, one where they are my people, and I am their God, and I will see their sins no more. But God isn't changing from one covenant to the next. God is showing himself to his people from one covenant to the next. The first covenant was meant to show God. The Israelites got it wrong. They didn't quite understand it. Then Jesus comes. Jesus explains God to the people. And the new covenant makes it even easier because now in the new covenant, we also receive the helper and the comforter to reveal God to us. But God doesn't change. So Job being before any kind of covenant doesn't change the fact that God still allows bad things to happen to Job. Not only does God allow it, God even puts parameters on it. God says, you may do whatever you want to Job, but you may not take his life, showing God's sovereign control. Even the devil, in open rebellion to God, must adhere to God's law. God said, you can do whatever you want to Job, but you can't take his life. Right? So I don't see how you get around it. Yeah, law is the strength of sin, 100%. I agree that he knows all things, but he did give man dominion over the world. We messed that up. That is still in operation today. Yes, but that doesn't mean that God still doesn't allow it, right? There is a difference. So I think determining where you and I might be finding a bit of friction. By saying God allows bad things to happen, I am not saying that God is the author of bad things. But I'm not saying God is sitting there physically concocting a bad thing. Life is corrupt, right? Bad things happen. You cross the street and a drunk guy speeds over the stop street and kills you. That guy was drunk because of his own sin. You were sort of in your own mind because of your sin, and two things happened and a bad outcome happened. God didn't put the drunk guy in that road. The drunk guy chose that road. God didn't put you in the middle of the street. You chose to cross the street without looking. But God still allowed that to happen. Now, we believe that God allows it to happen because at the end of it all, it is good, right? And what will follow from it is good. And we see that very often in the era or in the event of really bad things that happen. We see really good things come out of it. I'll give you guys a great example. I just found out about this Friday. When the Muslims conquered Greece, this is at the height of the Dark Ages in Europe. Europe is suffering, struggling, and the Muslims conquer Greece. And because the Christians have now figured out that these Muslims mean business when they conquer, all of the Christian scholars that was now sort of located in Greece, because it was the final country where they could still get access to papers and books. But once Greece falls, all of these scholars flee inward, right? They flee into Europe because, well, the lost civilization has now collapsed. The scholar, I can't remember his name, but the man that first translated the Bible from Greek to Latin is among the scholars that flee from Greece into Europe. This scholar becomes best friends with Luther, Martin Luther. Thanks to the translation from Greek to Latin, Luther is finally able to see the corruption of the Catholic Church, which he had not seen prior, which leads to the Reformation. God allowed Greece to be sacked and nearly destroyed to ensure the Reformation. And no one would argue that the Reformation, well, Catholics might argue that the Reformation wasn't good, but no one serious will argue that the Reformation wasn't incredibly good, even for the Catholic Church, because right after the Reformation of the Protestant Church, the Catholics also reform and go through a number of reformations themselves, which takes them away from heresy and blasphemy towards a better path. So God uses this incredible suffering and pain to bring about salvation to millions, because from these scholars that now flee to Europe, the Renaissance happens. The Age of Enlightenment happens in Europe, right? And Europe experiences the first great Renaissance in European history because all of these scholars are now bringing back knowledge into Europe, right? So millions are saved, perhaps billions are saved, right, over the due course of history. But yes, thousands had to die as a result of that. So that's sort of what I mean, the determining, if that makes sense, right? Not sure. Malice, Ottoman Empire. I believe at this point, yes, it is the Ottoman Empire at this point when Greece is sacked. Again, though the whole allow thing doesn't follow because it does make it sound like God is the author of evil. Determining how. I am not the author of evil if I allow a bad thing. So I'll give you an example. Your child is being naughty, right? And he's continuously climbing on the tree. You keep saying, don't, no, stop. And he doesn't want to listen. Now you stand back and you allow him to go. You know the tree isn't that high that he will absolutely destroy himself, right? But it is high enough that if he falls, he's going to feel it for a bit. You just allow it to happen because you're trying to teach your child a lesson. Did you author your child falling and breaking his arm? No, you didn't author that. You didn't put your child on the tree. You didn't force your child to slip. But in order for your child to learn a valuable lesson, you had to allow for your child to go through this event. That doesn't make you the author of the event. But in order to reprove, you had to allow for your child to get hurt here, so as to stop your child from being destroyed later on. This is exactly why God allows things to happen to us, to stop us from being destroyed later on. Now, if God's focus is only on eternal life and not on the comforts that we experience right now, then the suffering that God allows us to go through now is to save our eternal souls. So, in the same way that a father allows his child to get a little hurt so that his child doesn't grow up to be a brat, right, or kill himself, right? Because if I don't stop my child from climbing on these trees now, the child is going to climb on much higher trees later. And so I allow my child to fall off of the little tree and break his arm, but that means he doesn't go onto the big tree and break his neck. You know, that doesn't make you the author of it, but it does mean that you allow it to happen so that it can be better. I think disciple and allowing people to die is a little different. I get the first, but the second doesn't make sense. What do you mean allowing people to die? You're still thinking in terms of human comfort to determining. For God, this life matters in no way, shape, or form. God is eternal. This is a blink of an eye. You don't deserve life here, right? No one, like, God doesn't owe you life. This life is of no consequence. This life only leads to the next. And so, if Paul says this, can the clay say to the potter, "Why did you shape me this way?" How? You belong to God. God can take you whenever he pleases. Your life is a gift from him. You didn't earn it. You don't do anything to deserve it. It's a gift, and he can revoke that gift at any point in time for his own purposes. The question is, do you trust God to know that his purposes are always good and not selfish and wicked and evil? And my answer is yes. I know that whatever God does is good because he is good. And therefore, I trust that when God allows bad things to happen, it is bad from my perspective, but it's only bad because I'm not omnipotent. I don't know how everything fits together. So I'm looking at the bad thing happening here in front of me because that's what I'm limited to seeing. But there are millions of things that's happening behind this that I can't see, right? I can't see the millions of things that's happening behind it. So I'm blinded in only the limited things that I can see. God is omnipotent. He sees it all. And so I trust that whatever happens, even though I might not understand it with my own mind, I know that it's good because God wouldn't do it otherwise. He wouldn't allow it to happen otherwise. And that's where faith comes in. It's where you have to accept that if you know that God is good, you also know that everything he does because it's good. Because he can't do anything else. He's incapable of not doing good because good is what he is. Has a lot. Tim Keller has a lot teaching on why bad things happen to good people argument. My soul is tired. I must try find that. What are we talking about now? What did Karen say? Oh, Tim Keller. Karen, I'll check it out. Tim Keller. Let me add it to my list of books. I tend to go to the Puritans in this regard. I'm a huge fan of the Puritan writers. The way that they viewed the world is absolutely phenomenal. Joe, how you doing, sir? And I absolutely agree with you. Love the apologetics. Corin, thank you. It's what I believe all Christians should be doing. My nephew is that kid. My son is naturally cautious. We have to encourage him to be brave and try. Shanda, that's the thing, right? As a parent, you sometimes, some kids like myself, I was the kid that, if my parents didn't stop me, I would absolutely have slaughtered myself. My brother was the opposite. And there, my parents were sort of like, go get yourself in situations where you learn the limits of your own abilities, right? So there is a bit of a push and a pull that happens with all kids, I guess, uh, to some extent. The investigation of Steenhuisen. Joe, a lot of people are calling for it. The problem is none of the people that you need calling for it are currently calling for it. And that's because we live in one of the most corrupt countries on earth. That's why. Uh, as sad as this is to say, that's 100% why. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, is there anything else that you guys would like to ask before I go? Because we've already been here for 2 hours, and I try to do only 1 hour in the week. Like Tuesdays and Thursdays are 1 hour, and then 2.5 hours is for Fridays. But we got really into it, and this was fun. I enjoyed it. So as long as you guys enjoyed it as well, although I'm sure for a lot of people, they're like, I didn't come here for a sermon. Will you make a channel dedicated to Bible study? Call me Amy. I won't. And that's not because I wouldn't love to do it. I don't know enough. Right? I am very new in the faith. I've only been a Christian for a little over 2 months, 2 years. 2 years and about 2 months at this point. And so I don't I feel I am still learning, right? I still need to learn. There's still much that I have to learn. And so I am most certainly not in a position where I can teach others how to do Bible study. This is why in these conversations, all I can do is chat and give you my perspective on how I see it. But I don't think I'm anywhere close to being a teacher. So for that purpose and that purpose alone, I will not make a channel um, dedicated to Christianity, because if I'm going to do that, Paul says, as a teacher, I am responsible for the souls of those I teach. I am not ready for that. That is a responsibility. I am still trying to figure out my own life. I am certainly not in a place where I can teach. So you still think God is in control? It's a joke. Oh no, I'm sorry, I missed the whole thing. So my views are very much informed by my church and my pastor, and all of them have been much longer in the faith than I have been. I think you would be good at it, to be honest. Call me Amy. Thank you. I appreciate that. But let me first learn what I need to learn. Because I do believe that apologetics and being a Christian and being serious about your faith is super important. I do not believe that politics and Christianity can be separated from one another. This is why whenever I get viewers that say, "Could you stop with the religious stuff?" I will always tell them that they're free to leave. They don't have to stay. No one is forcing you to be here. But my faith is why I believe the way that I do. The way that I vote, all of it is informed by my faith. To ask me to separate my faith from my politics would be to ask me to stop thinking. I can't do that. Right? So I believe that if you're going to talk about politics, you must include God in it. Because politics is downstream from culture, and culture is downstream from faith. That is why so many cultures throughout the world is completely fallen and being destroyed, because the faith has completely disappeared. People are making immoral decisions because they don't even know what morality is. So if I'm gonna establish politics, I have to establish faith first, then culture, and then politics. So from my perspective, it's always gonna be, that's the way that I view things. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for coming out, for hanging out. And yes, worldview is Christ centered. It has to be. If your worldview is sort of based on Christ standing in the corner, then I would argue you don't know who Christ is, and you are not Christian. Christ is either at the center of all things you do, or he's not, and then you don't know him. But ladies and gentlemen, I thank all of you for coming out, for hanging out with me, for spending time with me. I will see all of you again on Thursday, God willing. Hopefully, there'll be a lot of big news, maybe some good news. Doubt it, though. We live in South Africa. Good news is almost never the thing that we get, but who knows, right? Stranger things has happened before, and it might happen again. Nevertheless, I will be back tomorrow with more videos and more content and more everything. I want to thank all of you for coming out, for hanging out. Turk's Faith, thank you so much for the memberships as well as the donations from every single one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, without your support, I physically, literally would not be able to do what I do here. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. To become a member, join button below this stream. You'll literally see it. It's join there. To donate, you can just super chat. I think it's the same button actually to super chat. Or if you want to donate directly and you don't want to do monthly donations, you can go click the description, the stub link there. That will allow you to donate. But first and foremost, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for liking. And thank you so much for being here. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.